Welcome into my 2021-2022 NBA schedule breakdown for the Portland Trail Blazers. I've designed this video so that in the future you can come back and check this video out and compare our win-loss record to what I believe would be a 50-win pace. That 50-win pace will be determined based on our predicted strength of schedule, taking into account our easier stretches and our harder stretches. I have a strength of schedule for each month that is predicated upon a tiered weighting system, and that tiered weighting system is based on my predictions for next season. The tiers are as follows. Now, I'm not going to tell you the win-loss records that I have for any of these teams. There's a reason I'm doing these in tiers. One, it's easier, and two, I will have standings predictions videos as we head into October. But overall, I think this predicted strength of schedule makes the schedule breakdown unique and different from other schedule breakdowns you'll find out there. I poured a ton of time and effort into making this as good of a breakdown as possible. Shout out to you if you've seen all the schedule breakdowns I've ever done all the way back to my days at True Blazer Fan. That means you're an OG and I appreciate the support. If you've seen those prior videos, then you should already have a good feeling for how this one will go. Now, accompanying this video on our website that launched only a week and a half ago, I will have an article detailing some of the key games of the season. These are going to be big games, whether it's games that'll be fighting for playoff positioning, determining tiebreakers, or maybe games with a big storyline going in. I will have that article linked in the description below once it is launched. I will do that with various videos this year where I have an article accompanying said video to provide additional context or maybe a little something extra. So with that being said, let's jump into the full schedule breakdown. So over the course of the schedule breakdown, I will have this table up to accompany each month that we go over. We will go over things on a month-to-month basis and also based on each homestand and road trip. So in terms of the SOS portion of this table, that stands for strength of schedule. The pure strength of schedule is just based on the predicted strength of our opponent. The H/A stands for home or away. That strength of schedule takes into account our predicted strength of opponent as well as if we're playing on the road or at home. Now, I went back to the 2018-2019 season to get home/road numbers because that was the last season that we had a full 82 game season where home court advantage actually fully mattered. In that season, if you had two 500 teams facing off against each other, the home team had a 60% chance of winning that game and an away team had only a 40% chance of winning that game. Because home court advantage is back this season, I will be looking at the home/road strength of schedule more than just the pure strength of schedule. I just want to toss both in there. The next portion of the table goes over how many games we play that month, and then out of those games, how many are at home and how many are on the road. And then the miscellaneous section includes how many back-to-backs we have that month, as well as how many stretches of at least 2 days off we have during that month. At the end of each month, I will give our predicted record if we are on a 50-win pace. In our hardest month, a 50-win pace could simply mean going 8-8. That's because that's a decent record if you're playing a lot of top-end teams, and then in later months where we might have an easier schedule, we should be able to clean up and reach that 50-win pace. So that is how the schedule breakdown is going to look like. Let's jump into things starting on October 20th with our season opener, which is at home against the Sacramento Kings. The Blazers had their home opening winning streak snapped. It was an NBA record 19 games, if I recall correctly, and the Utah Jazz not only snapped that streak, they blew the Blazers out last year with a 20-point victory. So Portland will try and start this season off on a better note, and they have an easier opponent to do so in a team that they should beat. This will be the first game that truly matters under new head coach Chauncey Billups. After this game, the Blazers do have 2 days off before they face the Phoenix Suns, the Western Conference champions from the year prior, so that's a good early litmus test. They faced the Clippers for the first time on October 25th. They have the Grizzlies on the 27th, and then they face the Clippers again on the 29th. So the Blazers will face a team that is without Kawhi Leonard for the majority of next season, if not all, and they'll face them a lot early on in this season. It'll be interesting to see how good the Clippers are in the regular season without Kawhi Leonard, and it's really hard to predict how these games will go. Over the course of October, the Blazers only play 6 games, so it's not a big sample size. 4 of those are at home, so the Blazers have a lot of home games early. Therefore, their strength of schedule when counting home and road is only 47.7%. If the Blazers are on a 50-win pace, they should be 4-2 after this month. Now, to start off November, before we even look at individual stretches of games, the Blazers play 16 games in this month. I don't recall the Blazers ever playing 16 games in one single month, let alone a month that had 30 days or less. November is a shorter than normal month, and the Blazers have a ton of games. This is the first time I will reference back-to-backs. The Blazers have 6 back-to-backs during the month of November, which is probably a record for any Blazers schedule breakdown I've done. This might be the most games in a month and the most back-to-backs in a month of any team in the entire NBA. I would not be surprised if that is the case. It is also the Blazers' hardest month in terms of strength of schedule when you're counting home and road. Now, they do have their most stretches of 2 days off in any month, with 4 to kind of give them some stretches where they can get a little bit of rest, but this is going to be a hard month of November. 7 games at home, 9 on the road. Just looking at individual stretches, they start off the month against the Philadelphia 76ers. Who knows what the 76ers look like? Who knows if Ben Simmons is still on their team? They then face the Cavs and the Pacers, so the Blazers, I think, should win 2 out of those 3 games. That would really get the month off to a good start. If they can go 4-2 in October, like I said, and then win 2 of those first 3 games and be 6-3, that would make it a little bit easier for the stretch after that because it's brutal. They get a home game on the second night of a back-to-back against Los Angeles Lakers. That'll be Carmelo's return. They then face the Clippers for the 3rd time in 11 games. Then on the road trip, they get the Phoenix Suns, the Houston Rockets, which will be your first look of the Blazers going against 2nd overall pick Jalen Green, and then the Nuggets to round out a 4-game road trip. Blazers have 2 top teams in the West on second nights of back-to-backs in this stretch. That's the Lakers and the Suns. If they can pick up one of those games, that'll go a long way to proving their mettle early on in the season. They then get a little bit of relief. They come home and face the Toronto Raptors and Chicago Bulls, both of which I think will be fringe playoff teams in the East. They then have the 76ers again, and then after only playing 1 game in 5 days, they round out their home trip with the Denver Nuggets. It's crazy how despite having 16 games in this month, the Blazers have a game on the 17th, 2 days of rest, a game on the 20th, 2 more days of rest, and a game on the 23rd. So that'll be when the Blazers can maybe regain some of their legs. Starting with the 23rd, the Blazers have another jam-packed stretch. They then go on a 3-game road trip. They face the Kings on the 24th, Warriors 26th, Jazz 29th, and then round out the month with the number 1 overall pick, Cade Cunningham, coming to Portland. So as you can see, there's a lot of good Western Conference playoff teams in this month of November. It's by far their hardest month of the season if you just take into account who they're playing, and it's also the hardest month because they have a ton of back-to-backs. Now, I do like how their road trips are pretty evenly split up here. They start the month with the last 2 games of a 3-game trip. They then go on a 4-game road trip. Then late in November go on a 3-game road trip. So in a month with this many games where the Blazers are playing a lot, I think it makes it harder if the Blazers are constantly transitioning from road to home. You'll notice that their schedule is a lot like this, where if they go on the road, they're usually going to be playing 3 or 4 games on the road. And that means that the Blazers in the end will end up traveling less miles. So I think that is a good thing for the team. Now, given the strength of schedule in this month, if the Blazers are on a 50-win pace, I think they will only be 12-10 after this month of November. I think they go 8-8 in the month of November. Now, this 50-win pace is actually determined by math. So if the Blazers can start off with something like a 13-9 record, a 14-8 record, that's a really good start to the season, and they are on pace for more than 50 wins. Let's hope that is the case. Now, at the end of November, things get easy for the Portland Trail Blazers, starting with that November 30th game against the Detroit Pistons. They then go into the month of December, where they only have 4 games on the road and 10 at home. Now, their strength of opponent, if you're not looking at home court advantage, is actually harder than the month of November, but considering how many home games the Blazers have during this month, I expect this to be an easier schedule. They also only have 1 back-to-back in the month of December. That's much better than November. And they also have 2 stretches of 2 days off or more. So they start this month off with the last 3 games of a 4-game homestand. All these games are winnable against the Spurs, Celtics, and they play their 4th game against the Clippers on December 6th. They then have a 1-game road trip going to Golden State to play the Warriors. Now, after that game against the Warriors, the Blazers have 3 days off, and they come home and they face the Timberwolves, Suns, Grizzlies, Hornets. A good homestand for the Blazers. They should go 3-1 on that homestand. They then go on what I would call a feisty 2-game road trip, 19th of December against the Grizzlies and the 21st against the Pelicans. Both are fringe playoff teams in the West. Both teams could be envisioning themselves as ahead of Portland if Portland doesn't have a good start to the season, which is certainly possible given the hard early season schedule. The Blazers then have 4 very tough opponents to end 2021. That is the Brooklyn Nets, Dallas Mavericks, Utah Jazz, and Los Angeles Lakers. I'm hoping the Blazers can go at least 2-2 during the stretch. 3 of those games will be at home. Over the 14 games in this month of December, a 50-win pace would see the Blazers going 8-6 in this month for a finishing record of 20-16. So if the Blazers are 20-16 at the new year, don't sweat it. That is a 50-win pace taking into account opponent strength. Now, some teams will surprise, some teams will disappoint. So this isn't a flawless system, but this is as good as it gets for predicting what a 50-win pace could look like. The Blazers only have 4 road games between November 30th and January 13th. So if you want to go see some Blazer basketball, I know a lot of you probably haven't been able to see the Blazers play in a while. You will get a ton of opportunities over this stretch. Now, starting off 2022, the Blazers have one of their easier months of the season. They do have 9 of their 15 games on the road. However, it is divided up into 2 separate road trips. They have a 4-game homestand to start the year. They play the Hawks, Heat, Cavs, and Kings. That's 3 Eastern Conference opponents. In seasons where the Blazers have had a good record, they've beaten up on Eastern Conference opponents. We'll see if they're able to do that. The Blazers, bare minimum, I think should go 3-1 on this homestand, but if they're playing well, I could easily see them going 4-0. However, after January 9th, things get brutal for the Blazers in terms of where they're playing their games. They only have 2 home games between January 9th and February 4th. First, let's look at this 6-game road trip. The Blazers go on the road, starting off with their divisional foe in the Denver Nuggets. They then go on an Eastern Conference trip where they play 5 Eastern Conference teams with the Wizards, Magic, Heat, Celtics, and Raptors. So a lot of Eastern Conference teams during the month of January. It will be interesting to see how the East versus West compares and if the Blazers are able to make some headway against some Eastern Conference opponents. They then come home with the Timberwolves and Mavericks on a back-to-back. So even though they finally are able to come home, it's not a situation where the Blazers can rest. They're right back on the road. Their next 3 games are pretty easy. They got the Rockets and Thunder, who are bottom feeders. The Bulls are better this year. So overall, this month of January has a lot of road games, 2 back-to-backs, 2 stretches of 2 days off. But the strength of opponents is pretty easy during this month. A 50-win pace over the month of January would see the Blazers going 10-5 in this month, which might be surprising, but there's a lot of teams during this stretch that the Blazers should beat despite playing in that team's home arena. A 50-win pace would see the Blazers finishing the month of January with a 30-21 record, so finally gaining some ground above the 500 line. Now let's jump into February, where the Blazers only have 10 games. This month we'll have the All-Star break, All-Star weekend, and the trade deadline. The Blazers start the month with a game that could be a statement win against the Los Angeles Lakers on the 2nd. They then come home for a pretty mixed bag of a homestand. They get their first look at the Milwaukee Bucks on the 5th. They play the Lakers again on the 9th. They round out the homestand with a Knicks team that looked pretty good last season. It's hard to predict what they will be this year. They then finish off the, quote, first half of the season. It's more like the first 2/3 of the season, but their last 2 games before the All-Star break are on the road against the Bucks yet again and the Memphis Grizzlies. It'll be important for the Blazers to finish out this stretch with some momentum. That February 14th game on Valentine's Day against the Milwaukee Bucks could be just that. The All-Star break is 8 days days for the Portland Trail Blazers. They will start at home after the break against the Golden State Warriors. They then will have another 2 days of rest. So that's 11 days where the Blazers only have to play one game. They then finish off a mini homestand right after the break with the Denver Nuggets on February 27th. Overall, in the month of February, the Blazers have 2 back-to-backs, 3 stretches of 2 days off. That is not counting the All-Star break. And in this month, for a 50-win pace, the Blazers should go 6-4. I think they have 2 easy wins in the Oklahoma City Thunder and the Orlando Magic at home to start this month. None of the other games are games that I think will be easy for the Portland Trail Blazers. I think they will need to split the other 8 games over this month of February. A 6-4 record over the month of February would leave the Blazers at 36-25 exiting this month. And as they exit this month and look ahead to the month of March, it is brutal. 9 out of the first 10 games in the month of March are on the road for the Blazers, and they started off with the Western Conference champion Phoenix Suns. They then have their first stretch where they play the same team twice in a row. I hate that. I wish they'd get rid of it, but it looks like that is going to be a feature late in this season. It is against the Minnesota Timberwolves, and what's weird about it is it's not a situation where the Blazers play at home and then on the road or vice versa. Both those games are in Minnesota. Minnesota is one of the harshest cities to play in during winter, so getting these games in March and both back-to-back on the road might be nice for the Portland Trail Blazers as well as any media traveling with the team. These 2 games divide up the top 2 seeds in the Western Conference last season, as to end this 4-game road trip, the Blazers have the Utah Jazz. Then their one singular game at home will come against Bradley Beal in the Washington Wizards. Now, maybe Bradley Beal isn't on the Washington Wizards if he gets traded at the trade deadline. The trade deadline will happen before this game. So if the Wizards decide to blow it up, this could be an easy game, but I'm expecting Beal to stay there. He's been pretty loyal. The Blazers then go on a 5-game Eastern Conference road trip right after their one singular home game against the Wizards. That Eastern Conference trip has 3 playoff teams from last year with the Hawks, Knicks, and Nets, a play-in team from last year in the Pacers who I think could be better, and a Detroit Pistons team who at this point in the season might be clicking and might be better than people think, with Cade Cunningham leading the charge. Overall, 2-3 on this road trip wouldn't be bad for the Portland Trail Blazers. 3-2 would be pretty good. Now, of course, this is based on the standards of a 50-win season. Maybe the Blazers are much better than that. Hopefully, they're not much worse than that. After that final game against the Pistons, it gets easy for the Portland Trail Blazers in terms of their strength of opponent. Over the following 9 games to end March and April, the Blazers only play 4 separate teams. That is the Spurs 3 times, the Rockets twice, the Thunder twice, and the Pelicans twice. That stretch lasts up to April 7th. So to finish the month of March, the Blazers have a 5-game homestand. It's their last home games of the year until the season finale against the Utah Jazz on April 10th. It'll be important for the Blazers to take care of business on this homestand. They are better than all the teams they're playing. I would hope that the Blazers are able to at least go 4-1 on this homestand, if not 5-0. 5-0 should definitely be the goal. Over this month of March, the Blazers' strength of opponent is extremely easy. Outside of games against the Suns, Jazz, and Nets, I believe that the Blazers are surely better than any team they're playing over the stretch. So despite starting off the month with 9 out of 10 games on the road, a 50-win pace for the Blazers during the month of March would have them going 10-5 to finish the month with a record of 46-30. Now, as we look into the final 6 games of the season, the Blazers then go on the road. They have 2 games in a row against the San Antonio Spurs. They then play the Thunder again and play the Pelicans again and finish it off with the Dallas Mavericks. That is a key game. Definitely check out the website for why that Mavericks game is going to be crucial. This is a road trip the Blazers should make some serious noise on, in my opinion. If you combine this to the homestand prior, the Blazers could build some serious momentum to end the season, much like they did last year. However, it's hard to predict how good the Spurs will be. They have a lot of guys that could break out, and maybe they're playing for a play-in spot and are tougher than people think. Same thing goes for the New Orleans Pelicans. I believe they will definitely be in a battle for the 10th seed. I believe they will improve a bit going into next year. I don't think they'll be a playoff team, but it's very possible that the Pelicans on April 7th are fighting for their lives against the Portland Trailblazers and could make that a really tough game. And then, as I said, wrapping up the road trip with the Mavericks on the 8th, and then they play the Utah Jazz on the 10th. That Jazz game could be a battle for positioning, or it could be a game where the Jazz are completely locked in, maybe to the 1 seed like they were last year, and maybe they're not trying and the Blazers are trying and trying to get a better seed. Overall, in the month of April, a 50-win pace would see the Blazers going 4-2, and I believe the 4 easiest wins would be the 4 games to start the month against the Spurs, Thunder, and Pelicans. That 4-2 record would put the Blazers at 50-32, hence the 50-win pace. So if you look at the schedule as a whole, there are a few things that you can take into account. One is that the Blazers have a very hard schedule early on in the season, but also a lot of home games in which to make headway. And then later on in the season, especially from January 13th to March 21st, where the Blazers have 10 games at home and 21 on the road, the latter part of the schedule is very road heavy. The Blazers aren't traveling as much as they have in previous years. That is because home and road trips are divided up pretty well, in my opinion. It's not something where the Blazers are bouncing back and forth, having to go on the road for a game, say to Minnesota, and then travel back to Portland, then travel back out on the road. It's much easier when the Blazers have 4, 5, and 6 game road trips compared to 2 and 3 game road trips. I also think it's easier for the Blazers because they can get into the mentality of being on the road and then get comfortable with being at home. You know, not comfortable where they're throwing games or playing bad. More so, these longer homestands could help the Blazers build more momentum on them that they could carry over into these other road trips. So that's kind of the glass half full spin on the road and home games and how those games are split up. In terms of rest, the Blazers are at a disadvantage compared to every other NBA team. There are 8 games where the Blazers will have a rest advantage going in, and there are 11 games where the Blazers will be at a rest disadvantage going in. Overall, this is just kind of a weird schedule for the Blazers. It's definitely not evenly spread in terms of home and road. It's definitely not evenly spread in terms of strength of opponent. Overall, this is a season where I think the Blazers have to hang tough through October and November, and then they can start making some headway. Here is the table for the 50-win pace that I set for this team each month, and it'll be interesting to go back at the end of each month and compare the Blazers' record to this table. So with that, that's a wrap for the schedule breakdown. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope this is something that you enjoy going back to as the season progresses in order to compare what the Blazers are doing to what I've laid out in this video. So with that, that's a wrap for the schedule breakdown. I hope you found this insightful, and I hope you enjoy going back to this video as the season progresses in order to compare what the Blazers are doing to what I laid out in this video. Make sure to check the article on the website that I drafted up for this video. And with that, I'm out of here. Until next time, as always, peace out. Go Blazers.